Everyone, my name is Owen, and before we start, I would like to conduct a land acknowledgement. Since I am joining you from Calgary, Alberta, Canadian Musicians Cooperative and I acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7 that have taken care of this land, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Our guest today is a record producer, mixer, and songwriter at Bluewater Music Group. Douglas Romanow has worked with endless lists of talented musicians, award winners, and industry professionals. He regularly participates as a panelist at music conferences, including Canadian Music Week, Western Canadian Music Awards, and Canadian Country Music Week. At many events, he's presented the interactive workshop Behind the Glass, an insider's look at record production, and topliner/track guy. He's known for his musicality, his clear and amiable leadership style, his strong communication skills, and his dry sense of humor. He lives in both Toronto, Ontario, and Nashville, Tennessee. Please join me in welcoming the brilliant Douglas Romanow. Take it away, Doug.
Hey, hi, everybody. Can I see people? There they are. With me, everybody. We're going to talk about craftsmanship and professionalism. Oh, how sexy. First of all, I'm going to start with just get a few questions to you guys, just so I get a sense of who's on this call. The first one is, if you could just throw in the chat what your principal interest in the music business is. Are you an artist, a musician, session musician, an engineer, something other? If you can just throw that in chat real quick, that would be awesome. And everybody, if you can just take a look at your chats, just so you can kind of clock who's in with us. Some of these people you may have met already, and some you may just be getting to know now. Okay, some artists, some producers, some singer-songwriters. Awesome. Wanted to... I'm next going to ask you to put in the chat what I want you to dream big here, what your career goal is. So if you could do anything you wanted and there was a direct line to that, what would it be? So think big and just throw that in chat so we can take a look at that too. Opening for Arkells. Wouldn't it be better if they opened for you? That's cool. Great. World tours, international tours, selling out stadiums, writing and performing songs at Feel Good, making platinum album. Great. Full-time work as a guitarist, bassist. Good, great. Making a living doing live music, touring consistently as a side band. Excellent. I'm on my phone, you guys, so I just sort of see the first line. So forgive me if I kind of hack my way through your life goals. I guess I want to start by asking you something, and this is where we don't have to use chat, but you can just jump on. Feel free to just unmute and throw your comments in. Let's make this as interactive as possible. It's the best way to get through this next hour and a bit. What do you think is the difference between a professional and an amateur musician, artist, engineer? Someone want to just jump in? Let me hear some voices. So living at it, okay. Great. Consistent quality. That's good. So do you think you can tell the difference between an amateur musician? I'm going to use the word musician, and by that I could mean guitar player in a band, and I also could mean a recording artist, and I could mean a live performer, a singer, a drummer. Can you tell the difference between an amateur and a professional by watching them play? Thumbs up for yeses. What does it look like in your mind? How can you tell the difference between someone who's a professional and someone who's an amateur? Pros make it look easy. Confidence. Okay. Skill level. So, guys, I guess it's not a leading question, but I am wondering, like, there are some people who don't make music professionally who are incredibly proficient on their instruments, yeah? Some people, like amateur simply means for the love of, right? So someone could spend a lot of time. Understanding of the music business, okay, that's interesting. They treat it as a business and career. Excellent. Those are all great answers. How they handle issues and interrupt. What's that say? Do this. Fantastic comments, you guys. I don't know if you're watching your chats, but all this stuff is great. I guess I want to start by asking you guys a little bit about prepping on sessions. Let me get back here. How many hours do you typically put into rehearsing for a gig? If you've got a gig at the end of the month, how many hours do you put in as an artist who's either learning her songs or a band that's getting together to rehearse? So this is in a month, let's say. Cedric says as many as it takes, but that's a little bit ambiguous. Cedric, what do you mean by that? Hmm. Okay. And knowing the material, is that the end of prepping for, this is a general question, is knowing the material the end of preparation, or is there more that goes into prepping for a performance beyond knowing the material? What else do you think you have to prep for? Stage presence, feeling material, stage presence. Interesting. So in other words, performance has to do with more than just engaging the audience, Thomas says. It's more than just knowing the music itself, but you're actually in a performance. Guys, I've always said that the music business is one ring in the circus. There's a multi-ring circus, and in that circus, you as musician performers are competing for people's attention. And there are many other rings. There's video games, and there's movies, and there's all the streaming services and traditional television and pornography. There's just so much stuff that can draw people's attention, and you're simply, in a way, a performer in the circus. So don't be afraid. Don't be surprised if it feels a little crazy at times. One of the things I wanted to, I just want to go through a quick list about prepping for rehearsals. And the reason I'm going to go through this list is because I think we've identified that there are differences between professionals and amateurs. Amateurs do it for the love. They might do it until they feel good about it. But there are other criteria that performers need to bring in if they're professionals. You know, for instance, when you got booked to do a gig, it's not just to express yourself and play your music as well as you can. You have to take into consideration the fact that there are people who booked you and they have expectations as well. And purely transactionally, the bar that booked you wants to sell alcohol. So they're as interested in the size of the crowd that you bring as they are in the music that you make. Or for instance, if you get hired to play a wedding, for instance, this is not a rock and roll thing, but everybody, even the largest pop stars in the world, I just saw Justin Bieber playing at for some private party in Dubai, you know, because people who have money will hire whoever they want to come and play their private party, and maybe that party is because it's a New Year's party, or someone has a bar mitzvah, or it's a wedding or whatever. So you end up playing this. And one of the things you want to be thinking about is, well, the people that hired you, what are their expectations? Which is a consideration that you might not have if you're just at home writing your songs and trying to make them as polished as you can. And sometimes it's like, yeah, you did all this original music, but they really want to hear their favorite song for the big dance. And so even though you're an original singer-songwriter, you might be requested to play Stairway to Heaven or some pop song. Anyway, there are considerations beyond that. And being a professional means you need to keep a lot of things in mind because you're being paid. And that means you have to leave the client a happy customer. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. I'm going to go back. Great. So let's start with rehearsals. First of all, when you're prepping for your rehearsal, I want you to take note of a few things. One, it's really great if you can memorize your lyrics. So if you're a singer, try to get off book, as they say in theater. Get off book as soon as you can. Know the songs backwards and forwards. And if someone says, go to the bridge, the music director, the MD, we'll call him the MD, we'll call her the MD, or the AD, the artistic director, says, let's go to the bridge. You should know what the bridge is. Know what the lyric is for that. So try to be off book before your rehearsal. So this is stuff that you do in advance of the rehearsal. The difference between, in my experience, having run many shows, mostly at the Country Music Awards, where I've been the music director for 12 years in a row, is that the musicians and the singers, whether they're background singers, all know their stuff before they arrive. So they've gone through the material in advance. Of course, they have to receive it in advance. You're not sight reading it. And they're really prepped on it. They know what their harmonies are, and they know what the lyrics are. Because when you're in the show, you obviously want to be present in the show. People don't want to see you with your nose in your book or your nose down in your iPad. Okay. So memorize your lyrics. especially true for art if you're working with artists who are and doing multi-show gigs. So if you're hired as a guitar player to do a tour, then you don't want to be on charts, especially if that artist is signed and with like you would never get up. Just pick any band, pick the Arkells, and they need a second guitar player to step in to cover some parts, or they want a keyboard player on the road. They don't normally have whatever. A second keyboard player. You learn all the parts that you need to know before you get on the road with them and before you get into rehearsal. And that's one of the ways that you're actually going to get the gig is by knowing the material. So if you get an opportunity to audition to be a singer, drummer, guitar player, bass player in band, you want to know that material backwards and forwards before you get in. And that's one of the ways you're going to get the gig. Because they just want to know that you're that committed to their project. If they feel that you're jobbing, if you're just sort of, this is one gig of many gigs and you're just trying to piece together your month and they're about as important as the next gig and the gig after, then they're less likely to hire you and bring you in for any term tours. Does that make sense? If you are on charts, and this does happen, especially if you're doing, pickup gigs, and that's true in blues and country, and less so in rock and alternative, you kind of have to know the material in advance. But for stuff that's sort of based in a 1-4-5 chord progression and or cover bands, then you can be on charts, but be discreet about that. So the way that most musicians are doing that is by moving away from paper charts into iPads, because you can have the iPad carefully placed. And this is where not only do you own an iPad, but you also own a clip for it. And you can place that iPad sort of halfway down a music stand or clip to the side of your keyboard or on the floor. So it's really out of the way. So you're using it more as just a reminder, oh yeah, we're going to the 6 minor in the bridge. You're not like nose down. That's such a drag, when you're not really part of the energy. The fact that you're on charts at all should feel like that's kind of showing the magic trick, like for the magic trick to work, you really have to pretend like it's magic. So, or at least it should appear like it's magic. So I know that there's some chats coming in. Can we just stop for a second and let's, Owen, if you can just read some of these questions as they're coming in.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not seeing any yet.
Okay, I just saw comments go by. So I thought,
sorry.
Just throw a few comments at me.
Yeah, one from.
Yeah, I hear it. Oh, yeah, a chart is a piece of paper that's got all the chords written down and sometimes the melody lead lines so that musicians know what to play. They're sometimes called cheat sheets, and sometimes they're just called chord charts, and sometimes they're called roadmaps. So all those terms really refer to a 1-page, to be like 8.5 by 11, and on it it's got the name of the song plus all the chords in what order and what the chords are going in the song, so that everybody knows what chord to play at the same time. It doesn't really tell you what to play, it just tells you what chord to play. So it's up to you, if someone hands you a chord chart, that you've listened to the recordings in advance and or watched the YouTube live shows, and you know what you're supposed to be playing. Is this a dirty part? Is this a clean part? Is this an arpeggiated part? And that's what a chart is. So most of the time, these little cheat sheets are on iPads or even iPhones, if you can read them that small. And the idea is to be discreet about them when you're on stage. But back to prepping for your rehearsal, have all those charts scanned and inside your iPad ahead of time, so that you can just you know, when you get to the first rehearsal and they say, okay, here's the show order, then you can quickly just move your charts around and get them ready, so that as the music director is moving you through the show and through the set, you can just quickly flip to the next song and be ready. So, yeah. Any questions there? I'm going to keep talking. Owen, you just interrupt me anytime, okay? I just want to say one thing, that sign of, now, we talked about amateur for the love of and professional for the business of, okay? If you make your living at it, then you're a professional. And if you're an amateur, you do it for the love of it. It doesn't mean that you're less of a musician or anything like that. Generally, people who are amateurs have to make their living somewhere else, which means they're spending at least 40 hours making money somewhere else. So they're probably not going to be as good, but that's not always the case. So just put that in mind when I say this next thing. But the sign of an amateur, if we're using it in a derogatory sense, is a musician who plays when they're not supposed to. And this is a real common problem with young musicians who come into rehearsals, and they will tune up and then they will play, they will up and down their scales, and exactly, Dave, noodling. Up and down their scales, they're just goofing around, they're in their own world, and everybody else is trying to talk to one another, but, you know, keyboard player over there is, you know, up and down, making noise, drummers going gung 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 blah, 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 and nobody can get anything done when that's happening. So rehearsing is not practicing. Practicing is what you do on your own. You know, if you have to work out the fills or the parts that are in each particular, this is the groove for this song, this is the sound, I got to get this song. That's the stuff you do on your own. And then you can do minor tweaks when you're in rehearsal with other musicians. It's especially important if the artist is in the room. Okay, so many times the artist is separate from the band. The band is hired by the music director to learn the music, and then the artist arrives and is going to run the material. But they certainly expect that when the music director counts it in and plays, that's what the song is. They're expecting it to sound like the record, like the music that they know. And so sometimes they'll say, you know what, I just want to slow it down a little bit right here. You know, like they're nudging it, they're massaging it around a bit to find it. I want to do this way faster than what's on the record. Like those are artistic calls that you work out in rehearsal. But what you're not doing, as soon as the music director will stop and say, okay, stop, hands up. They're going to go like this, and then everyone stops. And if someone's going to keep playing and doing something, I guarantee you they will not be in that rehearsal more than one day. The music director does not raise her voice over top of musicians. So just a general principle, you play when everyone's playing, and you don't play unless you're asked to play something, okay? So if the music director counts you in, or ask the drummer to count in, that's when you play. And when you stop, everybody stops. And then there's discussions. Hey, if you're going to play like that, I'm going to do this. What are you doing? Da, 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 da. I'm going to do this too. So you're working stuff out, but you're never making people sit around and listen to you noodle and so on, okay? So if that is a habit of yours, I'd like you to stamp on that right now, because it's going to prohibit you music theater gig, whether you're doing a rock and roll gig, whether you're on a tour with a pop artist, or even in the classical realm, okay? Any questions on that? No. A thud of silence. All right. I'm going to talk about prepping for recording sessions. Now, some of you said that you would like to be in recording sessions. Many recording artists want to be making records. That's what a recording artist is. Some of the signs of professionals: one, recording artists know their songs before they go in. If they're really smart, they will have printed lyric sheets, not for just themselves, but also for the producer. So when they show up to do vocal sessions, they can say, hey, here's a copy of all my lyrics, so you can follow along. They're expecting the producer to give notes to help them move through the material. And obviously it's much easier if the producer goes, what did you say there? Like, if I can just look and go, oh, you said, take a look, and the lyric sheet says, take another look. You know, which one do you want to do? Because an artist in the moment won't always catch this stuff, and then later they'll drive home and listen and go, crap, I should have said, take another look, and I didn't. So, you know, that's the producer's job, to make sure that you're checking and making sure the lyrics are right. And also that articulation is happening, you know, so like the lyric on the page is what I can actually. So that's important too. So session singers, unless you're coming in as a background singer and you don't know the stuff, you have to learn it on the spot. Generally, you should bring your lyrics with you, and you should kind of know what you're going to do, right? More or less, this is what the song is, and you just run it down at the piano at home. You've worked it out with your vocal coach. Like, this is the kind of stuff you can do before you get to recording sessions. Recording sessions are expensive. You know, yes, the studio costs whatever, $50 an hour, $150 an hour, depending where you are. But you're also paying a producer, and sometimes you're paying an engineer on top of that. So, you know, you can see every hour that you're there, you are spending good money to be there. And you need to be there because you're going to get a better sound with better people helping you. But be prepared so that you're not wasting. What else can I tell you? Oh yeah, for singers, don't oversing when you're getting ready to prep for sessions. Okay, so a light warm up is great, but I've seen singers come into the studio who've been singing at the top of their lungs for an hour on the Gardner before they get over to the studio, and then their vocals, they've got 10 minutes and then it's absolutely blown. So you're saving your energy. You're just simply warming up your instrument. Okay. Now we could talk a lot more about the vocal instrument and what you need to do to keep that instrument in shape. It's a different kind of instrument than playing a guitar or a saxophone, or you can be sick and have a snotty nose and play drums all day long, and your drumming might sound fine. But that is not true for singers. So there is a particular regime that you need to have, and having a vocal coach, regardless of what stage you are at in your development, is imperative. So you should be working with a vocal coach every month, regardless of where you are. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a vocal coach for Shawn Mendes, and Shawn Mendes was doing a big tour, and they had to pull out a couple dates because while they were working him way too hard, he was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do these drive shows. And then they were going to do label meetings and radio interviews. And then there was a noon thing. And then they were doing something like, I don't know, it's like songwriting sessions in the afternoon. And then he was getting on stage and singing in front of 20,000 people at night. And that's a great day, right? Except that he was doing it every day. And his voice just gave out in the distance. So she was jumping on Zoom calls, helping build his voice back up. You know, there's a good way to sing and there's a better way to sing, so that you can have stamina and maintain health. But anyway, so that's on the vocal side. Any questions on that before I move on?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a question. I'm only seeing the first line there, Owen, so you'll have to read it to me.
Yep. Is how do you deal with a band member who constantly comes up with excuses and is late / misses rehearsals / doesn't come to rehearsals prepared?
Dave says, find a new band member. That's what I would do. What would you guys do? Just throw it in the chat. Find a new band member. Is there anyone who might suggest something other than just dumping that body in the river? Is there another approach? before you bag them and dump them in the river?
I don't know if we're like supposed to talk in the chat only.
Please do. You can talk. I'd love to hear your voice.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if somebody's not coming to the party, eventually you do, that's definitely the last resort. But personally, I would say maybe communicating a bit of a probational period with that band member and explaining to them what the requirements are, and if they don't meet it over a span of time, like a month. I mean, you know, being in a band or pursuing a career like we're trying to do, it's a job, right? And if you're hiring somebody or if you're working with a band member, I mean, they become your colleague in essence, right? So maybe having like a probational period, and then, there's a clear communication on like, okay, you know, you knew that this was the deal. You didn't make X amount of rehearsals. I don't know. That's like my thoughts.
Appreciate that. That's great. Now, that does presuppose that there's someone in the band who is a leader. So the buck has to stop with someone, and someone has to have that hard conversation with the band member. And when you're friends and you're just kind of hanging out, and it all felt so good, and then you thought you'd do something together, and then it doesn't start to work out because people have different um, work ethics, maybe, or in it for different reasons. Like some people are in it for to go all the way to the top. They want a Billboard bullet. They want a Grammy Award hit selling record, or to make beautiful music. And some people are in it for all the sort of peripheral stuff, beer and wings, hookers and blow. I don't know anything about the last stuff, but I do know about beer and wings. So, they're in it for the party. And, that can be fine for a time, but then sometimes it does start to feel like, hey, if we're really going to go to the next level, we're going to have to rehearse more. We're going to have to take this really seriously. And that, we tiptoed through all the songs on Tuesday night, and we said it was good enough. It's really not good enough. We need to listen to those rehearsal tapes and go, we're still playing out of tune, or we're still rushing, or we need to be playing to a click track, or the harmonies are skunky, like we got to polish this up for it to be really good. And the show needs to feel good, like we're just standing there like sticks. And we need to move more, or we need to all lunge at the same thing, or we all need to wear got to wear the same kind of clothes, or make it look like a band, or whatever, like all that kind of stuff that makes that work. And that's true also for a solo act, making sure that the band also represents the artist, because even though the artist is maybe the driving force and the band is hired to support that artist, from the audience's point of view, you're all on stage together. So you're still a band, right? Even though there might be a star in the middle. I mean, a great example, of course, and this dates me, but U2, you probably don't know that band. The U2 is a rock band that started in the 80s, and you guys weren't alive yet. I'm joking, I'm sure you know U2, but it really does look like it's Bono and the backing band when you actually see the band. But they all are, they're a band, and he's the star really, but they all work together. Okay, so let's see. However you get everyone on board, whether you are a solo artist or you are a band that is trying to get your priorities in line with each other, so you're all sort of aiming in the same direction and basically lockstep, working together towards those goals. It's important that you somehow get there. And again, if there's someone who's really not living up to those expectations, then eventually you probably have to part ways. But it doesn't have to be, a massive blow up. But these things, happen. If you're in business and someone is not pulling their weight, it's much more straightforward in the business world. Just, this is what we're trying to accomplish. These are the things you need to do every day. Show up and do this. It's a job. And if you're not doing that, you're usually given a warning, and after that, you're let go. And, good luck with your next position. Maybe it'll fit you better. Let's talk a little bit about instrumentalists who are prepping for recording sessions. Any questions before I move on to that? So all good? Yeah? Okay, great. I hope you're finding all the chat comments entertaining, more entertaining than me chatting. Prepping for sessions. It's a couple things I want you to think about when you're going into the studio. And this is true for rehearsal, by the way. I haven't talked about this. Do I need to say this? I don't know if I do. I'll say it. And I hope you don't take it personally or condescending. You need to show up on time. Okay, I said it. Okay. And on time means 5 minutes early. Okay. But if the rehearsal's called it for 10 o'clock in the morning, they'll show up at 9:30, you know, that's too early. That's annoying. That unless you have drums to set up and tune before you get there, like if you're going into a recording session or into rehearsal and you have to do a complete setup and there's no backline. Backline is when the instruments are already provided in the rehearsal space or in the studio or on the live show. But if you have to bring your own and you have to set them up, give yourself enough time so that if the downbeat, that is when the music director goes 1, 2, 3, 4, go, is 10, and they say downbeat at 10, then you're ready. You are already tuned up at 10. You are already set up at 10. If you have tracks that you're wrangling, make sure your rig is set up, make sure your in-ears are right. Everything is right before 10 o'clock. Okay. But generally, if you're a bass player and you need to plug your bass in and check your tuning, like you don't need to show up an hour ahead of time. That's too keen, and it gets annoying because sometimes there's other things that artists and MDs are prepping on and planning to do in that time. So give them a little bit of space. 5 minutes late, not so cool. It really doesn't take much for the music director who's already got a lot on her plate to look at you and go, oh, you're trying to make my life harder, not easier, right? And your job as a professional session player is to make the producer's job, the artistic director, the music director's job easier, not harder. So just get your instruments ready. That's one thing. So if you need to put skins on, do that at home. Make sure the skins on your drums are new and or newish, so that they're just end tuned. Top and bottom skins, got that stuff tuned. Have options. I'm talking to drummers here for a moment. Have options in terms of cymbals and snare drums. So you might only bring one kick, but you might bring 3 or 4 snares. And in Nashville, where I do sessions, there are cartridge companies that will roll in a set of drums for the drummer who's ordered the drums in advance, and it's their drums, and they keep them in storage, and the cartridge company goes and picks them up and sets them up at the studio, so that when a drummer shows up at 9:45 for a 10 o'clock session, the drums are already set up by the cartridge company, and there are usually between 10 and 20 different snare drums. And usually 3 or 4 different sets of hi-hats, and usually 10 or 15 different cymbals. Just in terms of different kinds of rides, different kinds of crashes. Is there a gong? Just stuff. Be prepared to have options available. So should the producer say, hey, I'm really looking for something more Green Day, you can say, I got the snare for that. This one's too dry and too like indie rock. Let's take that one off and bring this big pingy Black Beauty and go kabing, kabing, and make it rock and roll. And you can very quickly kind of shift the sound of what you're offering. That's what you're there to do, is to serve the vision of the artist and the producer. And that's why you've been hired. So they already know they love you. That's why you got the gig. There's a lot of people out there, and you got the gig, and so you're coming in. But be prepared to give them options. Usually a drummer will also bring in a bag of percussion. So a dozen different kinds of shakers, there's eggs, but then there's also maracas. And there's different kinds of maracas. There's a wood maraca. There's like a calfskin maraca. They all sound different. Some of them sound big and thick and kush, 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 and some of them are, like there's just different stuff. So when you hear the track go down, oh, this is like a rock and roll, like Rolling Stones vibe or something. So we're going to use these big old maraca things. And then for something kind of slick and pop, you might be using a really small, soft shaker that's going to blend really nicely with the track. You're listening to what are the best sounds that you can offer to make this the most incredible recording. Snare drums, kick cymbals. That's generally what drummers do. Prepped in advance, make sure your drums are tuned. If you're sitting down at a backline kit, show up enough time that you can actually play through the toms and make sure that the toms are actually in tune, top and bottom skins. Because it's a drag, recording a backline kit and the drums are not great. Ultimately, they're just gonna take your performance, they're gonna grit it, anyway, they're gonna chop it and grit it, and then they're gonna trigger snares, kicks, toms, because the sounds that they got weren't great. So try to bring in really inspiring sounds, and the best way to do that is make sure everything's in tune, skins sound great. I don't know if we have any. There's probably no. Are there any drummers even in this call? Great. So, and that's important for all you guys to hear. Okay. Just so you know, like, why does it take the drummer so long? Because the drummer is hitting 18 things, and you brought your SM58 microphone. So, your guys have a lot of work to do to backing you up. I'll also say for guitar players, if I can move on to them, let me start with the easy one. Bass players. Bass players, you have to have good strings on your bass, but good strings on a bass can last for months. You just want to make sure that your bass pickups don't buzz. So make sure that your instrument itself records really well. Lots of bass players show up with their own preamp and their own compressor, so that they're just going to give an XLR line out and their rig is done. Like, the engineer doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to patch it into anything. They just take that line and they plug it into Pro Tools and put it on input, and you start playing, and it's already exactly what you want it to be. That is the standard in most professional situations. So a bass player will own whatever Galen Kruger head or whatever head they have, and then they'll also have an MI2A as a compressor, and they've spent good money on that, and they bring that little rack with them along with 4 or 5 different basses. Right? They've got their P bass, their J bass, they've got a couple of 5 strings, they might have a Hofner, just options, so that because it's nice to make a record where you can occasionally just move the sounds around and create some character. That's what you're there to do, right? Otherwise, they would use GarageBand. Guitar players, a lot of importance is placed on guitar players and what they bring to sessions and what they bring to live shows. So first of all, before we get into talking about what your rig is, let's just talk about the guitars themselves. Your guitars need to be set up. That means that regardless of what key you're playing in, that your intonation up and down the fretboard has been looked at. You don't have any squeaks, and you don't have issues with intonation. Like, sure, an open E is in tune. My tuner says it's in tune, and you play an E minor and it sounds great, but then as soon as you move up and play in the key of F or B flat or A flat and you're barring, then everything's like, whoa, that's not in tune. The most important thing you can do as a guitar player is play in tune. The most important thing you can do is play in tune. The second most important thing is play in time. Know how to play in time. Know how to lock to the band. The sound that you're bringing in, usually you bring in an acoustic guitar. or two, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But then you also bring in a couple different kinds of electrics. If you don't have enough money to have 18 guitars that are being brought in by a cartridge company, then my suggestion is, one, you bring in a good Gibson acoustic or a Taylor, and or a Martin, depending on what kind of music you make. And then you might bring in a second one that's tuned as a high string, and that's just a different tuning on that, so that you can quickly pick it up and play sort of a secondary part over top of your main part that will just sit in the track really well. And those guitars are set up, and the strings are relatively new. They're not old and dead, but they're also not, you don't put them on the moment before you start the session. Sometimes that's a little too bright, okay? So put your guitar strings on the night before, hammer on them for a couple of hours, just so they're kind of worked in, make sure that they're not slipping, and your tuning is solid. So that's on the acoustic side. On the electric side, you'll never go wrong with a Les Paul. You'll never go wrong with a Telly. Some people love Strats. And then, of course, you can get it in everything else. So I would suggest that you have a good Les Paul, Gibson, whether that be a Les Paul or 335, 135, something like that. That's either a hollow body or solid body that has that Gibson sound. That's meat and potatoes for all rock, blues, metal, certain kinds of genres. Obviously, I don't need to get too deep into this. Prefer the PRSs, and some prefer the Yamahas and whatever. But as a session person, you really need to know how to get to certain sounds really fast. You're not going to get there by using a Variax or a Kemper or whatever. You're going to get there by starting first and foremost with the guitar you're using. So have good guitars, have them in tune. And then finally, in terms of effects, yes, have your effects world dialed in, but make sure that if you turned all the effects off and you just played into your amp or your amp sim, that the tone itself is really solid, really believable, okay? Don't hide behind your effects. Then start adding your effects, and then you can do this offline. Don't do this in rehearsal, but start adding your effects one at a time and making sure that the blend of the effect to the tone is really pleasing. Don't go so heavy on effects that you can't hear the guitar anymore. Unless you're doing an absolute gag track where you're trying to do this sounds like a mellotron, now it sounds like a symphony orchestra, like you're trying to do the sort of wall of sound smeary wonderment. And that's a great gag. But that's not all you're going to be asked to do on a record. They also want you to put down just straight 8-note chugging, jig, 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 jig. And they're also going to want you to do big diamonds, which is just big whole notes, prang. And then they're going to want you to do some reverse stuff. And there's going to be high stuff. And then there's going to be some solos and whatever. So understand what your role is as a session player. Make sure you're on time. Your instruments are in great shape. And you've got your effects world in place. Make sure you don't have any hums and buzzes, okay? And one great little cheat for anybody who's doing anything electronic, including keyboard players, is carry one of those little 3 to 2 prong ground lifts. So I don't think they sell them at Home Depot or Rona anymore because they're illegal in Canada to sell them. However, you can still buy them on Amazon. And all it is that little plug that you plug your 3-prong thing into this, and there's only 2 coming out the other side. And what that does is it interrupts the ground. So if you're in a pinch and you can't get away from a low 60 cycle hum, then unplug your rig, plug in the cheater, plug it into the wall. 9 times out of 10, that's the issue. Okay? So keep that kind of stuff. And also having a little toolbox in the trunk of your car, that's, if you got to clip strings, having a pair of pliers, and a screwdriver if you have to open up the back of your guitar because your battery died, that sort of stuff. Everybody should have that. Be prepared. That's part of being a professional. Like if it was, just think about it in terms of if if you showed up to play the part and then your guitar battery died and you're going to do your show, and now your guitar's dead and there's not another guitar, so you're not going to play and then you're not going to get paid, and then it all goes to heck, and everybody's disappointed. Like that's basically a nightmare, right? So professionals have just done it enough and figured it out that they're just not going to get caught out like that. Oh, my battery's dead. I happen to have a brand new battery in my guitar case. So give me 2 minutes. And sometimes, getting that battery out can be a bit of a drag. So you've already done this. So you know how to get the battery out of your guitar and swapped out quickly. Or you break a string. You have an extra set of strings. It's like, oh, I broke my G string last week and I didn't get another set of strings, so I don't have a G. So now what are you going to do? Put the B on and tune it to a G? Better to have an extra set of strings because you're a professional. All right. Before I move on to other instruments, any questions on that stuff?
I'm not seeing any in the chat right now.
I'm seeing comments go by, but I'm not able to read them. So
no questions yet.
Okay. Are we having fun? I am. Okay, let me just make a comment too. Some people are not traditional. They're not traditional instrumentalists that are playing drums, bass, guitar, or keys. So if you happen to play the harp, you know that a harp is an instrument that needs to acclimatize, or it will never. They say you playing the harp is what is it? Half the time you spend tuning it, the other half playing out of tune. That's the joke. And so what you do is you drop your harp off the day before at the studio, and that's very common. Right. If I did a couple sessions where we had Steinway come in and drop off. It was two Steinway pianos, and two marimbas, and all the instruments were dropped off the day before, and they just sat in the studio open, taken out. The marimbas were put up on their stands and left there, and the pianos were uncovered, and just let them sort of acclimatize before the tuners come in. And they'll just stay in tune longer and better. So if that's the kind of instrument that you have, don't leave your cello in the trunk overnight in Canada and then expect that it's going to play in tune, because as a producer, I expect that the instrumentalist knows she's out of tune before I have to say it, right? That's the job of the instrumentalist, is to play in tune and to play in time. And occasionally I'll say, hey, can you guys check your tuning before we go again? And that's my job. But make sure your instrument will comply. So if you're playing a show in January and you play trumpet, and your horn's been sitting in the car for a few hours, it's going to be very cold, and it's going to take it a couple of hours before it's actually acclimatized and it's going to stay in tune, right? Because instruments that are cold are going to change. You're going to constantly be struggling with your mouthpiece to keep that thing in tune. Okay, that's what I have on that page. So that's really about rehearsing and getting ready for, kind of prepping for your rehearsal, and then in your rehearsals, getting ready for your gigs. Any general thoughts or questions on that stuff? Okay. This is the kind of stuff, by the way, in a professional environment, which you're all going to get an opportunity, because it's going to come your way. And if you have this stuff covered off, then you're going to look like a professional, and someone's going to, who's hiring you, is going to go, that person might be young, but they are serious about what they're doing, and I'm going to bring them back, right? If you come in and you miss these points, like let's say you're a little late, let's say you don't have your charts in order, or you can't keep your instrument in tune, that person not ready, it's very unlikely you'll get a call again, because People are already stretched to the limit, and they cannot afford to have a link in the chain that's gonna break on them, right? The whole thing has to work, and each person has to be able to pull their own weight. And I'm sure you probably know this, but I'm just going to say it out loud. If you're not ready for that job, there are no less than 10 people in the immediate vicinity who are absolutely ready and willing to take that job. They would love to have the opportunity to take that job, not away from you, but they want the job just as badly as you do. And maybe they want it even more than you do and are willing to prep and get ready for it. Okay. So I hope that I'm stressing it heavily because I want you all to win. I want you all to get the gigs of your dreams, and you know, we all make mistakes. So, you know, if you have a bad rehearsal and you lose a gig or whatever, it's not the end of the world. But if you're consistent about these things, like you don't play in time, you don't play in tune, you don't know your stuff, you don't know the material, you show up late, you're not good, you know, this is the beginning of the end. So maybe we'll find an AI that can replace you. I said it. Probably not. What did Keith Moon say? AI can't trash a hotel room. So there you go. The one thing I wrote down here that I wanted to pass along to you guys, to the degree that you are there to get the job done and can help the MD get through the material, is the deciding factor whether you'll be hired or not again. Okay. So the other thing I just want to talk to you about is attitude. It is true that great musicians get hired to play great music, but talent is actually pretty common. So people who can do really amazing things with their voices and with their instruments is kind of common. Sorry, it is, you know. And the higher up the chain you go, the more you realize, ooh, people that can sing great licks and play great stuff on guitar or great drum fills, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Why do some people keep getting the gigs? Why do there are session musicians that have like bought houses and paid for their cars and put their kids through university by being nothing but session musicians or touring musicians. Why do they keep getting called? Well, anyone have any ideas? Let's put them in the chat. Why do you think there are some professional musicians who get called over and over and over again? What are the deciding factors? Fira says they're a good vibe, easy to work with, they're collaborative, easy to work with, reliable, professionalism, personality, great attitude, respectful. Absolutely. We just want to add a couple things to those. You're absolutely right, everybody. Work ethic. They're very good at their instrument. That's again, you know, being punctual, professional. All these things are really important. I want to just pass on a couple things about attitude that I think has really nothing to do with how well you play your instrument, or even that you show up on time. You know, a person who shows up on time and plays their instrument really well, but is a drag, is not going to get the call. But people who actually always have a smile on their face, and who are, Fira just said, are humble, those people consistently get to work. And what's really remarkable to me, having worked with some people at the tippy top, in both as session musicians and as artists, is to see that generally people at the top are pretty humble people. They're confident people, but they're also humble, and they are willing to recognize their crew, whether it be the talent of their songwriters, their producers, their engineers, the commitment of their management team, all that. they really show how humble they are and how hardworking people are, and that's yeah. So I wanted to say smile in your face, and I wanted to mention always be the solutions person. You see, when things are going really well, the fact that you are a good hang and that you play really well and show up on time and you're a pro, that's all great. That's important. But things don't always go well. Anybody who's been in a tour bus knows it can get tough out there. And anybody who's been in multiple days of recording sessions and then having their new artistic work scrutinized by label heads or their management knows it can be tough. And it's in the tough times that's where you really show that you are a solutions person. I have a friend, Pat Carrot, he's a composer out in Vancouver. In 2008 and 2009, he was SOCAN's top international earner. So he was working on more sort of hit shows and hit television movies and was literally making bank, more money than anyone else. So he once told me when I was struggling with a particular gig, he and sort of some of the people were kind of going sideways, in the management and label side of things. He said, and I quote, "Be the energy in the room." That's what I want to leave with you today. Be the energy in the room. So that can be the difference between whether you're going to be seen as a real partner in the creative process and someone that they really want to keep around and want to build right into the nucleus of their engine, the thing that keeps going and grinds and moves forward, is if you're the energy in it. So what does that mean? It means sometimes you need someone to be an encouragement or to be a laugh, a solutions person. Hey, there's sometimes, people see this way or they see that way. It's A or it's B. It's black or it's white. But a solutions person says, actually, there's probably quite a number of different ways that we could do this effectively. You'll see it in a band rehearsal where, people kind of butt heads because somebody wants to do it halftime and somebody wants to barrel through and do it full time. And maybe the guitar player steps in and says, hey guys, we can try both. Let's try both. Maybe we do both. Maybe we, see what happens if we start at halftime and then go double time and then get back and do. Or what if we went 3/4 or 6/8 instead? Or what if it all pulled back and the singer went a cappella? There's lots of different musical solutions that could be helpful. You got to know when it's your place to offer musical solutions. If you're a side person in the rehearsal, leave it to the music director and the artist to figure that stuff out. But if they're saying, look, I'm looking for something, maybe we should try something spooky. Well, be the guitar player who's got spooky number 72 patch ready to rock, right? And can just throw out a little bit of ghosty stuff when they need it. Keyboard player, come up with those patches, where there's all kinds of cool ambiances or whatever. So be the solutions person in the room. Be the energy in the room. Yeah. That's really what I have for you tonight. I wanted to leave this open for some conversation with you guys. I'd love to hear what you're up to in your live shows right now, in and outside the co-op, and any other questions you have about the industry, even beyond this particular topic. So jump right in.
Guys, feel free to ask questions, or you can even unmute and talk to them.
Also, you can throw questions in the chat. No one will just read them out. That's also fine.
We got a question here. It says, what's the best way to fix intonation on the spot?
Intonation. Is this a guitar question or is this a vocal question?
Guitar.
Yes, guitar. Okay, thanks, Chelsea. The best way to fix intonation. Well, I'm not a guitar player, but I do know that intonation is really the way the bridge is set up. So doing it on the spot, I mean, you kind of have to be a bit of a guitar tech if you're going to do it on the spot. The better thing to do is to develop a relationship with a guitar tech that will either be on tour with you. So if you happen to be at a tour where there's a level where there is a guitar tech, they'll fix the guitars for you. You know, probably not in the moment, but they'll have they'll take a look at your whole rig. If you're, you know, I'm in Toronto, so I know that we used to have ring music in the West End and 12th fret in the East End, and those guitar techs, even Long and McQuaid's has good guitar techs, the Bloor Street store. So, you know, you can certainly take your guitars in there and have them set up and make sure, you know, and if you have concerns, literally just, you know, show them what your concerns are. In the moment, it's always going to have a backup guitar. So if you're really struggling with keeping a guitar in tune, then, you know, maybe there's an issue with it. You should pull out your backup guitar. That's about all I can suggest. You're welcome. Anybody got any road warrior stories? Anybody ever have to fire a band member?
I could actually probably speak to that, unfortunately. So I don't know. I guess going back a couple of years, I was in this band that I had started. And at a certain point, I think me and the rhythm section really hit like a real breaking point. And it was sort of like a slow decay over time. Like, I guess the way I saw it was like, it started not just in the fact that we had done a recording session playing songs we'd been playing live for like 2 years. And then on the day of recording, they basically came and like over guessing everything, like overplaying, constantly second guessing the parts that they had played for 2 years, despite the fact that we had like a whole weekend dedicated to recording. And, you know, me being there just trying to get as many takes as options as possible, and then constantly doing things that we hadn't been playing before. And I think one of the big sticking points was my drummer, who would always basically accuse me as if I was trying to tell him how to play his instrument, when in reality, my issue was that he was always doing fills, basically, that felt like he was serving his own ego instead of serving the music itself. And it always felt like for anybody else he would have been willing to, but suddenly in our band, he was making it all about him. And the problem led to there being like certain inconsistencies, because it felt like he was overplaying constantly instead of just playing something that he could play consistently. And it's, for me, it's like, if you're going to play fills, good, just make sure you can nail them every single time. But that's just it, nail them every single time, and not just like some of the times, or forget to do them some of the times too. I don't know. It's just like one of those things where it became a real lesson in trying to like wrangle a bunch of personalities to just do the work, stop second guessing, but also not making it solely about them when they're not putting in the effort to make it come into reality, if that makes sense.
Well, it sounds like, first of all, you're self-producing, right? And most of you are probably in a situation where you're not working with an outside producer. So you're going to have to work that out as a band. But usually you have to let somebody have the final say. So even in the band, there tends to be someone who says, okay, this is the tape we're going to use, or this is, we're done, we're moving on. You know, we've only got so much time, guys. We need to stop screwing around. We
Yeah.
got we're not going to get it done. So, you know, there's a few things to unpack there. But it is the collective road towards professionalism, right? That's not as easy when you're working inside a contained unit than if you're hiring session musicians. You will never have those problems with session musicians. Session musicians by default are there to serve the song and the project that they're brought in. And that's why you tend to get better results. Yeah, someone else.
Doug, we have a question. This is from Sean. It says, I'm auditioning with this jazz trio on bass on Thursday. I'm not much of a bass player, but I do my homework and I'm a good hang. Any advice?
Yeah, don't screw it up, man. I'm just kidding. It's it sounds like you're you're in the adventure. Like you're gonna go and try something you haven't done a lot of before, but you know, and you can be upfront about it and say, hey, look, are you more of a guitar player?
Yeah, I mainly play guitar. I played bass for about a year, and I've done some shows on bass, but
Okay.
it's more just like people who are already invested and would consider themselves professional in the scene. They're in like the Toronto jazz scene. And I'm like from small town 2 hours north. Like I just got out of school, so I'm pretty green when it comes to that stuff. Maybe I'm overthinking it too.
Yeah,
Just
the best thing I can say is go in with big ears. Just listen to what's going on. You don't have to make your mark. You don't have to prove anything. Just go in with big ears, try to make it as musical as you can, right?
Yeah.
It's probably the biggest mistake you could make is to place way too many notes.
Especially in that context, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much in every context. It doesn't matter whether it's folk or jazz or blues or pop. Like if you're playing too many notes, people are like, that's probably it's distracting, right?
Yeah.
Even if you were Marcus Miller coming in, it's like we probably didn't need Marcus Miller. We kind of need someone to hold down the bottom end, and and you'll figure it out if it feels good. And again, just enjoy the musical conversation between the bass and the piano and the guitar or whatever the combo is.
It's guitar and drums. So
guitar,
maybe I'll
drums,
just let them be really good and I'll just try and really hold it down.
Yeah, that's really what it is.
Focus on that.
If they throw you 8 bars and you want to, play out because they're giving you that, then give her, But after that, sit back in the pocket, lock with the band, and have a good time and try. That's what it is. Not to overthink it. It's just enjoy the music, focus on the music, go in with big ears, try to serve the song. If there's a singer, stay out of the way of the vocal. But be the foundation for the band.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Great. Good luck.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments they would like to say?
Well, if that's it, guys, here ends our journey together. I really appreciate you guys. Hope to see you in person sometime at the co-op. And try to remember some of these things. You're going to be starting to prep for your auditions for Showcase. So I know for a fact that artistic director and executive director are always looking for the professionals that stand out. And again, I said it before, what you don't have with experience, you make up with enthusiasm. So go in, have a great time, enjoy yourselves, learn as much as you can in this time in this program. As a member of the co-op, you're going to gain a lot from your time there. And have a great night.
Thank you so much, Doug. On behalf of the Canadian Musicians Cooperative, I want to thank you for making this workshop possible. Your insights and expertise have made a significant impact with a ton of great takeaways. So thank you so much for your valuable contribution, Doug.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, everybody.